This one habit is silently ruining your life, not with noise, not with chaos, and not with a dramatic collapse, but slowly, patiently, and invisibly. It does not announce itself. It does not feel dangerous. In fact, most of the time it feels normal. That is what makes it so destructive. While people look for big mistakes, sudden failures, or external reasons to explain why their life is not improving, this habit continues to grow stronger in the background, shaping their future without their awareness. Most people believe that life is ruined by one bad decision. They imagine failure as a single moment where everything goes wrong. But real damage rarely works like that. Real damage happens quietly. It happens when a small behavior is repeated so often that it becomes identity. It happens when something feels harmless enough to ignore, but powerful enough to control direction. By the time people realize what this habit has done to them, it has already taken years from their life. The habit that silently ruins lives is constant avoidance of discomfort. It is the habit of choosing what feels easy now instead of what builds strength later. It is the habit of delaying effort, postponing responsibility, and escaping uncomfortable emotions instead of facing them. This habit wears many masks. Sometimes it looks like procrastination. Sometimes it looks like distraction. Sometimes it looks like self-care, rest, or waiting for the right time. But underneath all these masks, it is the same pattern, avoiding discomfort at the cost of growth. Avoidance feels harmless because it offers relief. When something feels difficult, stressful, or demanding, avoidance removes the pressure instantly. You don't have to try. You don't have to risk failure. You don't have to face uncertainty. In that moment, avoidance feels like peace. But that peace is temporary, and the price you pay for it is long-term regret. The problem is not that people avoid discomfort once in a while. The problem is when avoidance becomes a habit. When avoidance becomes a habit, life begins to shrink. Challenges feel bigger, confidence feels weaker, motivation feels unreliable. Over time, people stop trusting themselves. They make promises they don't keep. They plan changes they never start. Slowly, silently, their self-respect erodes. Not because they failed, but because they stopped trying. This habit often begins innocently. A person avoids starting because they don't feel ready. They avoid speaking up because they fear judgment. They avoid working hard because they fear exhaustion. They avoid discipline because it feels restrictive. None of these decisions seem destructive on their own. In fact, they often feel reasonable. But repeated avoidance trains the mind to associate discomfort with danger, even when discomfort is necessary for growth. Over time, the brain learns a dangerous lesson. Discomfort must be escaped, not endured. Once this belief is formed, life becomes harder. Every challenge feels threatening. Every responsibility feels heavy. Every opportunity feels risky. The person begins to choose safety over progress, familiarity over improvement, and comfort over potential. This is how lives are quietly ruined without any dramatic failure. One of the most damaging effects of this habit is how it destroys momentum. Momentum is built by action, even imperfect action. But avoidance kills momentum before it starts. When people delay action, they delay feedback. When they delay feedback, they delay learning. When learning is delayed, growth stops. Over time, this creates a feeling of being stuck. People feel behind in life, but they cannot explain why. They feel capable, but not confident, ambitious, but inactive. This internal conflict is exhausting. Avoidance also weakens discipline. Discipline is not about punishment or force. Discipline is the ability to act despite discomfort. When discomfort is avoided repeatedly, discipline never develops. Without discipline, motivation becomes the only driving force, and motivation is unreliable. It disappears when things get hard. That is why people who rely on motivation keep restarting. They begin, stop, begin again, and stop again. Each restart weakens belief. Another way this habit ruins lives is by distorting time perception. When people avoid discomfort, they tell themselves they will act later. Later feels safe because it does not demand effort now. But later is an illusion. Later slowly turns into never. Years pass faster than expected. One day, people realize that the time they thought they had is gone. Not taken by tragedy, but wasted by avoidance. This habit also damages self-image. Every time you avoid what you know you should do, a small part of you notices. Even if you don't consciously think about it, your mind keeps score. It remembers the promises you broke with yourself. Over time, this creates an identity of inconsistency. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't follow through. This belief becomes self-fulfilling. You expect yourself to quit, so you do. Avoidance also affects relationships. People avoid difficult conversations. They avoid setting boundaries. They avoid expressing needs. This creates misunderstanding, resentment, and emotional distance. Problems that could have been resolved early grow larger. Relationships don't break suddenly. They decay slowly through unspoken words and avoided truths. Career growth is another victim of this habit. Many people avoid learning new skills because it feels uncomfortable to be a beginner. They avoid taking responsibility because it feels stressful. They avoid leadership because it feels risky. Over time, they become replaceable, not because they lack intelligence, but because they avoided growth. When opportunities pass them by, they feel unlucky, not realizing it was avoidance that kept them unprepared. Health also suffers under this habit. People avoid exercise because it feels tiring. They avoid improving diet because it feels restrictive. They avoid medical checkups because they fear bad news. The body, however, does not negotiate with avoidance. Small neglect accumulates, energy declines, pain appears. Health issues that could have been prevented become difficult to reverse. By the time people take health seriously, the cost is higher. Mental health is deeply affected as well. Avoidance teaches the mind to escape discomfort instead of processing it. Emotions are suppressed, not understood. Stress is ignored, not managed. Over time, this leads to anxiety, burnout, and numbness. People feel overwhelmed by life because they never learned how to sit with discomfort long enough to grow stronger. This habit also kills dreams quietly. Dreams require effort, patience, and uncertainty. Avoidance rejects all three. People still dream, but they stop working toward those dreams. Dreams become fantasies instead of goals. Eventually, people stop dreaming altogether, telling themselves they are being realistic. What they call realism is often fear dressed as wisdom. The most dangerous part of this habit is that it does not feel like self-destruction. It feels like relief. That is why it goes unnoticed. People believe they are protecting themselves from stress, failure, or pain. In reality, they are protecting themselves from growth. And without growth, life stagnates. This habit convinces people that discomfort is the enemy, when in reality, discomfort is the teacher. Growth always feels uncomfortable at first. Learning feels uncomfortable. Discipline feels uncomfortable. Change feels uncomfortable. But that discomfort is temporary. The regret of avoidance is permanent. By the time many people realize this, they feel trapped. They feel behind. They feel like they wasted years. And that realization hurts deeply. Not because they failed, but because they know they could have done better. That pain is heavy because it is mixed with self-blame. But here is the truth that changes everything. Awareness breaks the habit. The moment you see avoidance for what it is, it loses power. You don't need to become fearless. You don't need to become perfect. You only need to stop running from discomfort. Facing it, even in small ways, begins to rebuild strength. This script is not here to shame you. It is here to wake you up. because this habit ruins lives only when it remains invisible. Once you see it, you can change it.